Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Special Council on Pedestrian Traffic and Safety. I'm pleased to call this meeting to order this afternoon, if I can get my phone to cooperate. Well, maybe. Array security. Well, we were ready to go. All right. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. If we could run around the room real quick and introduce everybody for those that are watching us in TV land. We'll start with you today.
Brian Cole, Shawnee County Department of Corrections.
Craig Duke, Fire Chief.
Aaron Jones, Lieutenant with Topeka Police Department.
And I'm Brendan Jensen, the Deputy Mayor and the Councilman from District 6.
Mike Lesser, Councilman, District 9.
Barry Feeker, Topeka Rescue Mission. Bill Persinger, Vallejo Behavioral Healthcare.
I got an email from Mike number 5 this afternoon, Mike Padilla, and he is unavailable, will not be able to join us, so he sends his regrets. So with that, I will entertain a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting. They were emailed out. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to review them or not. I looked through them and didn't see anything that was horribly unusual, so.
Make motion.
Second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. So to continue our discussion from last time, when we broke, folks, we're going to go out and poke around and see if they had any other thoughts or comments on the approach we're taking at this point, and if there were any alternatives to trying to accomplish what we're charged with doing by the council. So with that, I'll open up the floor. Does anybody else have comments or thoughts on what we discussed last time?
Well,
Yes, sir.
I think it would be important, just my opinion, is important that I think this is a public safety and health matter, and that I would like to just focus on that and the high traffic areas and to be honest with you, to leave any discussion of panhandling or anything like that out of it, because I think they're two separate things, in my opinion. I think that this is a proposal that Luther eloquently brought forward to us and put together. I think there's a need that we have a high traffic area of accidents. I think for this committee, this is again my opinion, and for the city and our county and everybody, that when we have high areas of traffic of accidents, if we know that, we can show that there's accidents there, I think we have the obligation to do whatever we can to limit any types of there. And I think to do something different or do nothing would be worse. I think that, that limiting the amount of distractions on there is a good way to start. I don't think it has to be focused anything, in my opinion, towards panhandling or whatever. And I think if we want to discuss a possible panhandling ordinance or something like that, I'd be more than happy to help out with that. And if anybody knows me, I've always wanted to help those that are in who need help and who generally need it. But it's my recommendation. I'm certainly not trying to steal anybody's thunder or persuade anybody. It's just that I would like to focus strictly on this being a worthwhile cause of addressing a traffic area or areas that we have a lot of accidents and stuff, and I think we need to look at what steps we can take. So that's just my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Other comments? Yes, sir.
I would concur with some of your comments that you made there. The other thing that I would kind of want to dismiss that came a little bit about the other meeting that we had, and a lot of it came from Council Member Hiller, who was here, who made some comments, and I don't see her out there, but she brought up I guess what I'm looking for is a consensus of the committee, if everybody feels the same way. She brought up some requests for some actual data on accidents and what type of accidents. And in my position, and I think she was somewhat in agreement after I did discuss it with her a little bit after the meeting, was I don't know that any of that is relevant, quite frankly. I think what is relevant that Luther has presented with us, as well as other members of the city staff, is these areas are areas where a large number of accidents have happened. I do not know that it is important to know whether those were pedestrian with vehicle accidents, whether they were rear, whatever types they were. Because my position is, if, location 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the highest accident numbers in the city, the fact of having a distraction there inherently makes it a safety, less safe than any other issue in town, any other location in town. So I don't know that it's important, that my position, that's why I'm asking for some feedback, is my position is it doesn't matter whether it was actually the pedestrian struck by a car. I don't think that's, this is a safety issue in regards to, for whatever reason, this location here, Huntoon and Wanamaker, for instance, let's just say, has X number of accidents, and having someone distracting drivers standing there with a sign or whatever makes it a more dangerous intersection than if someone wasn't standing there. So I guess I want a little feedback on that before we were to ask for any data that I don't know that's relevant quite
Okay. Yes, sir.
I think Brian is, I concur with that as well. We're talking about pedestrian safety, and panhandling is one of probably other issues that we would be looking at here. So if it wants to be included as a part of discussion, but it's not the main part of the discussion, I do think it's a significant enough issue that there probably is a need for discussing ways that we can approach that separately from just pedestrian safety. But if we're talking about distractions, that's one of probably a number of other ones that can be mentioned here, but it really is about pedestrian safety, traffic safety, and not about panhandling.
So given that we're looking at whether or not this ordinance will affect traffic safety, and we're all fairly confident that the goal here is to prevent future fatalities or future accidents or future injuries, a significant fallout is that it will disproportionately displace folks who have a constitutional right to panhandle. And so if we're all in agreement that the idea behind what's been proposed is a good idea, what can we do to handle the largest aspect of the fallout, which I absolutely agree is the folks that have chosen to panhandle? So let's do this. Let's take a quick look at the actual ordinance that's been proposed and see if we have any major objections to it or any concerns about that. And if we don't, then let's take a look at the fallout that will create, given that we've approved what Mr. Gagne has presented. And if so, then what can we as a team of folks do to try and help mitigate that fallout where possible? Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Okay. So given the initial ordinance, Mr. Gagne.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I apologize. but
No, please.
I
You're the
thought I
ranking
should
expert here.
Probably say something before we go further.
Yeah.
In considering our discussion from last meeting involving the stats, so to speak, on the accidents,
Yeah.
there's actually, in considering that, there could be something to that.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is you go back to what I explained initially. The legal department did a lot of research on this. We've looked at a lot of ordinances, a lot of lawsuits. And one thing that is clear coming out of this is it's a very significant constitutional issue. And the framework, so to speak, that we have to work with is we need an ordinance that's narrowly tailored to further a compelling government interest. And that compelling government interest is potentially where the problem is. I don't want you to have the impression that this ordinance is bulletproof, because it is not. It's the best that we've been able to put together.
Okay.
We still could be sued. We still could lose that lawsuit. When it comes to that compelling government interest, there's a split around the country in the most recent cases dealing with this about what exactly that means. Our compelling government interest in this, I think we've identified it, it's traffic safety, pedestrian safety. The legal issue is, do we need to prove that? Some courts say we do, that they're simply not going to take the government's word that it's dangerous, and they need to produce stats and figures to support that. Other circuits say, no, that's good enough. If the government says it's inherently dangerous, then we accept that. It's a compelling government interest, and we move on. We don't know which side of the fence, if we had litigation, we would fall on. We've written the ordinance in a way that says it's inherently dangerous. We wrote it that way because it's not panhandlers that are getting run over.
Right.
That's the reality. It's jaywalkers and distracted drivers and bicycles, and that's where our accidents are happening. They are happening in the greatest amounts on these streets. So I just wanted you all as a body to be aware that this ordinance is far from perfect. It's the best we've been able to draft, but there is that potential risk if you were to approve this, that we may have to be called upon to prove the legitimacy of the compelling government interest in this case with real hard facts and stats. We may not be able to do that.
Well, and so I'll kick back and throw, so where does common sense come into play here? Would it be reasonable and prudent to assume that if I am distracting motorists on a street or a road, that would increase the risk of accidents?
Sure.
And so-
I think there are courts that have taken that approach.
And
that's
so
why
I'm-
they accept the inherently dangerous rationale. Other courts, not so much. They want some actual numbers.
So if we call the Topeka Foundry and order some different kinds of armor, would that qualify as bulletproof then? That's a joke, people.
It just wasn't funny, that's all.
Well, so do you have any suggestions for modification that could help improve that, or is it one of those things where we're on the bleeding edge of an issue that this is the best we can come up with at this
I
point?
don't know that we could write a better ordinance with what we've got to work with.
Okay.
Let me ask you
What
from while you're up here, other legal standpoint. Am I correct, and it may be for you as well, it's illegal to walk on the turnpike, correct?
Yes.
And it's illegal to bike on the turnpike or the side of the turnpike?
Yes.
From a legal how to a certain extent does that differ from, it's a safety issue obviously for that as well. So I'm just thinking out loud here of doesn't it go along the same lines? I'm wondering what that statute versus kind of what we're doing here.
Well, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but what you may be getting at is we have existing laws already for people being in the street, pedestrians. They're allowed to use crosswalks, sidewalks, cross the street at intersections, and those types of things. We have already existing in place laws against jaywalking and obstructing traffic and those kinds of things. And those laws are enforced. What you're talking about specifically with the turnpike, I mean, it's a controlled access highway, so it's not just pedestrians, but it's all kinds of pedestrians and low-speed vehicles are not allowed on that particular roadway. But yes, there are laws for that already. One of the things I was going to suggest, if you'd like to consider it, is alternatives. I've got about a 12-minute video I'd like to show you about a way to address a problem without necessarily having a criminal ordinance, an enforcement ordinance. It's a city of Albuquerque, New Mexico, started a work program to address the issue of panhandling in their community. So with your indulgence, I'd like to play that video for you.
Sure.
See that,
Yeah,
sure.
I'd be interested.
While you're doing that as well, I would like to thank Lieutenant Jones. You sent some really good information that you shared with Barry and I want to thank you for, he sent that to me as well. That was helpful.
So, Brian Cole.
Oh, it was you?
It was Brian.
Oh, I thought it was, yeah, I want to thank
Take credit where you can.
Yeah.
I was going to be.
When they're in your favor, you
Oh, I thought it was overachiever.
You're young, you got time living down there. I mean, it's all right.
I'm sorry, I apologize for your. Still good information.
it is good information.
Joys of technology.
Mr. Chairman, just while they're in the interim here, just a question for the.
Sure.
For the future is when we look at other city ordinances and other city programs, which I really appreciate Luther preparing for us, is there any, attorneys, I think, have access to like list of case law, court cases, and kind of where the verdicts are coming down on, do we a priori have to prove, or should we prove a need, or can we just go ahead and pass an ordinance and assume that a court someday would see our need?
Well, and that's a lot of what
Is
we've
there a
looked at
list of
thus
kind of-
far. Yes, because initially we talked about this about 9 months ago, and they looked at existing case law and how a lot of the cases had come down.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's when we determined that the initial ordinance that we were bringing forth was not going to be successful.
Oh.
And so this is based specifically on one.
So he's been down that road already then? That's
Yes,
good.
yeah,
Okay.
and that's, which is an excellent point, because the last thing we want to do is field something that we know
Right.
is not going to work. So,
Thank you.
because otherwise, you're right, it's just inviting an issue.
Okay, good.
So,
Thank you. That-
and there are a number of ordinances that we have passed in the past that the staff has come to us and said, given recent case law, this is not a good idea to continue having, and we have repealed those. So, it's a chicken and egg. This is our best guess. If we put it in place, then those folks will continue monitoring, and if it becomes an issue, then they'll come back and say, we either need to change it or pull it.
And are there municipalities or other levels of government that have gone to the court before they implement an ordinance?
You
Or is
can
that ever
do-
even done? I don't even know if that's even. I'm
It's
just asking
possible to do a
naivete.
friendly lawsuit against it, but the issue is that that's the opinion of a single judge.
Okay.
And so, what we're looking for is, case law over the appeals process in several municipalities where you begin to have a trend that develops.
Okay.
And I will tell you, Wichita, I did talk to the mayor of Wichita, and they
Okay.
did extensive, he had told me they did extensive research in regards to that. And as of now, unless Luther knows something I don't know, they've not been challenged.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So we're a little bit going into it thinking probably could
Yeah,
put something
it's an
up that's
educated
narrow
guess,
enough
but
that
we
wouldn't be challenged.
done a lot of
There's risk there,
educating.
but okay.
So, yeah.
Gotcha.
Oh, this is a TED Talk. I like TED Talks.
So raise your hand if you've seen somebody in your city standing on a corner holding a sign like this. I think we all have. If you're being honest, at least one time, have you wondered if they mean it? If we offered them a job, would they really take it? And what would that job mean to them in their lives? Well, this is a story about what happened in my city when we decided to find out. When we decided to think differently about panhandling and lift people up through the dignity of work. We call it There's a Better Way. We call it There's a Better Way because I believe there's a better way to get the money you need than panhandling on the corner. I believe there's a better way to help your brothers and sisters in need than handing a few dollars out the car window. We know there's dignity in work. We also know that people are much more likely to invest in themselves if they believe that their community is willing to invest in them first. And because we're all wired to be kind and compassionate, it always feels good to hand a couple of dollars to someone that is in need. But if you talk to panhandlers, many of them will tell you that your few dollars don't necessarily go towards feeding the body, they go towards feeding an addiction. There's a better way. My name is Richard Berry, and I have one of the best jobs in the world. I get to be the mayor of a great American city, Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I was at lunch on July 17th, 2015 in my great American city. Then on my way back to City Hall, I saw this gentleman standing on a corner. And as you can see, he's holding a sign. And his sign says he wants a job. But if you look closer at the picture, you'll see he's standing underneath a blue sign. And that sign says, if you need help, if you need food or shelter, or you would like to donate, please call 311, our community service number. So why is this guy standing underneath my sign with his sign? Well, we wondered if anybody would call that 311 sign. As it turns out, they did. 11,000 times people called. Wow. I put those up at about 30 intersections. And we did connect them with food and shelter and services. But yet he's still standing under my sign with a sign that says he wants a job. It's simple, he wants a job. So I decided to do something rare in government. I decided to make the solution simpler rather than more complicated. I went back to my office, I gathered my staff around, and I said, we're going to take this man at his word and others like him. The man says he wants a job, we're going to give him a job, and we're going to make our city an even better place in the meantime. You see, Albuquerque's a beautiful place. We're a mile high, the Sandia Mountains on the east, the Rio Grande runs through the center of our city. We're the home of the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. On a day like today, you could literally ski this morning and golf this afternoon. But there's always something to do, always weeds to pull, litter to pick up. So if you're going to have an initiative like this in your city, you have to ask yourself two questions. First one is there anything left to do in your city? Then if the answer is no, would you please give me your mayor's phone number, because I need some advice. But the second question you have to ask is this: are your solutions to panhandling working? If you're like Albuquerque and you're taking the punitive approach, like we used to, handing out tickets to panhandlers or those who give them money, I'm going to suggest that your solutions aren't working. And I know you're not getting to the root of the problem in your city. So if you have something to do, you need people that need something to do, there's a better way. And the good news is, it's not that complicated. This is a 2006 Dodge van. It was in my motor pool, not doing anything. We put some new tires on it, wrapped it with the logo. This van now goes out to street corners where our panhandlers are. We go to them. We stop the van, we get out, we ask them if they would like a day's work rather than panhandling for the day. And if you wonder if they really mean it, it takes us about an hour to fill this van up in the morning because almost everybody we ask takes a job for the day. But you need more than just a van. You need a super fantastic human being to drive that van. And my super fantastic human being, his name is Will. This is him in the yellow vest. Will works with our local nonprofit partner. He works with the homeless every day. The panhandlers trust him. He believes in them. He hustles. I like to say, where there's a will, there's a way. So if you're going to do the Better Way campaign in your city, you need to find yourself a Will. Because he's really one of the keys to making this successful in the city of Albuquerque. You also need a great nonprofit partner, and ours is St. Martin's Hospitality Center. They've been in our community for over 30 years. They provide counseling, food, shelter, and if they don't provide it, they know somebody in our city that does. But they do something much more for me as the mayor. They provide agility. You see, it takes me 2 weeks, maybe 2 months sometimes, to onboard an employee with the city of Albuquerque. So you can imagine my old Dodge van, my super fantastic human being Will, my great local nonprofit partner. They drive to the corner, there's a panhandler, they say, would you like to work for the day? The panhandler says yes, when Will says, great, I'll be back in 6 weeks to pick you up. It wouldn't work. It's really important that we have that agility in our program. And they do the paperwork, they do the insurance, they do all of the other forms that I can't do quickly. We pay our panhandlers $9 an hour. We feed them once at the job site. At the end of the day, our old Dodge van takes them right back to St. Martin's, and they get connected with counseling services. So far, with the pilot program in a couple days a week, and a fantastic human being in a Dodge van, we cleaned up 400 city blocks in the city of Albuquerque. We picked up over 117,000 pounds of trash, weeds, and litter. And I don't know if you've ever weighed a tumbleweed, but they don't weigh much. So you can imagine the volume of material that we've picked up. So my city has 6,000 employees, and none better than my solid waste department. We send our trucks out at the end of the day. They help the panhandlers put into the truck the material that they picked up during the day, and we take it to the landfill. I'm lucky that I have city employees that are willing to work side by side with our panhandlers. They're lifting up our city while lifting up their lives. And like anything else, listen, it takes resources. But the good news is, it doesn't take much. We started with an old van, a super fantastic human being, a great local nonprofit, and $50,000. But we also had to have community trust. And fortunately, we had built that up in years prior to Better Way. We have a program called Albuquerque Heading Home, a housing first model where we house the chronically homeless. And when I told my community we wanted to do that differently, I said, there's a smart way to do the right thing. We have now housed 650 chronically homeless, medically vulnerable, frankly, most likely to die in the streets in our city. We commissioned our university, they studied it. We can tell the taxpayers we can save you 31.6% over the cost of leaving someone to struggle for survival on the streets. We've now saved over $5 million while housing 650 people. So we had that community trust, but we had to have a little bit more of an honest conversation also as a community. Because we had to get people to understand that when they hand those $5 out the window, they might actually be minimizing their opportunity to help the person in need. And here's why. That $5 might go to buying some fast food today. A lot of times it goes to buying drugs and alcohol. That same $5, if you gave it to one of our shelters, could feed 7 people today. And if you gave it to one of our local food banks or food pantries, we could actually feed 20 people with that money. People ask, well, Albuquerque's 600,000 people, million metro. This wouldn't work in our city. We're too big, we're too small. I disagree. If you have one panhandler in one city block, you could do this. If you live in a city of 8.5 million people, you can do this. And it doesn't matter what you do. It's not the work that you do, it's the dignity of the work. You could do anything. So I think any city could do this. And people say to me, Mayor, that's just a little too simple. You know, it can't work that way. But I'll tell you what, friends. When you go to a street corner and you engage with a panhandler with dignity and respect, maybe for the first time in years, maybe in their life, and you tell them that you believe in them and that this is their city as much as it's your city, and that you actually need their help to make our place better, and that you understand that this isn't the answer to all their problems, but at least it's a start, an amazing thing happens. And when they get out on the job site, they start working together. You start seeing amazing things happen. They see teamwork. They see the fact that they can make a difference. And at the end of the day, when they get back to St. Martin's in that old Dodge van, they're much more likely to sign up for whatever services they need. Substance abuse, mental health counseling, you name it. So far, with our pilot program, we've offered about 1,700 days of day work. We've connected 216 people to permanent employment opportunities. 20 people actually qualify for our housing first model, Heading Home, and they've been housed. And over 150 people have been connected to mental health, substance abuse services through There's a Better Way. But this is me, just 2 weeks ago, at St. Martin's, doing our point in time survey that we do every 2 years. And I'm interviewing a gentleman who's homeless, like we do, getting his information, figuring out where he's from, how he got there, what we can do to help him. And you notice he's holding the same sign that the guy was holding in 2015. Same sign I walked out with here today. So you have to ask yourself, is he really making a difference? Absolutely he's making a difference. Albuquerque is now one of the national leaders in combating some of the most stubborn and persistent social issues that we have. Combined with Albuquerque Heading Home, the Better Way program, Albuquerque has reduced unsheltered homelessness in our city by 80% last year. Since I took over as mayor, we've been able to reduce the chronic homeless population in our city by 40%. And by HUD's definition, we've gotten to functional zero, which means we've literally ended veterans' homelessness in the city of Albuquerque by being intentional. So I'm happy to report that other cities are hearing about this. Other mayors are calling us. Chicago, Seattle, Denver, Dallas are now starting to implement programs where they bring the dignity of work to the equation. And I can't wait to learn from them. I can't wait to see what their experiment looks like, what their pilot project looks like, so we can start taking a collective approach nationally to the dignity of work. And I want to commend them, the mayors, their communities, their nonprofits for the work that they're doing. So who's next? Are you and your city ready to step up? Are you ready to think differently about these persistent social issues? Are you ready to lift people up in your community through the dignity of work and make your city profoundly better in many ways? Well, if you are, my friends, I promise you there is a better way. Thank you.
What are the chances we have a Dodge van somewhere, Mr. Trout?
I have a Chevy.
Ooh, a Chevy. We're moving up in the world.
There we go.
That was wonderful, Luther. Thank you.
A couple of things that might be.
Sure, yeah, please, please.
What you saw in the video. This is an alternative. You know, as an alternative to taking an enforcement ordinance. What they've done here is built a program. Albuquerque's a lot bigger city than we are. One of the things that they do in that program, though, is educational. The signs out on the corners where the panhandlers are, telling people how they can make better use of their donation rather than giving it directly out of their car window. Some of that money goes to support this work program. That's partly how they are funding it. There's grants, things like that are available to help fund that. And when it comes to the vehicles, you know, it may be a possibility for forfeiture funds for the police department to purchase a vehicle. That's an option. But there are ways to make it work if funding is an option.
Well, and he mentioned that they had a similar ordinance that criminalized that too. I wonder if the solution is to do both. You know, we've talked about what do we do with, if we enact this ordinance for traffic safety, what do we do, you know, with the folks that are displaced? And you had mentioned a work program even before, so,
It was
you
that
know.
one.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I mean, so are we looking at, what I'm wondering is that program successful partially because they have something in place that pushes people into it? And you know, that may be an answer that you could give.
We don't know the answer to that, I'm sure, but I think it's an excellent program. I appreciate you bringing this forth to us. This is really, it's a win-win in a lot of situations.
Sure,
It's resources, absolutely. We've got infrastructure systems set up in our community already that could already give us a head start on this, where maybe some communities don't have that. We have fantastic collaborations. Whether it's an ordinance in lieu of an ordinance or both, I think personally it's much better to start out with this particular piece because it's very proactive. It's not punitive. If the ordinance has to follow it because there has to be some push to it, but from a public perception, it's very proactive. It shows everybody working together for people who are very concerned about the treatment of the homeless, which many people in our community are. They're very positively concerned. An ordinance seems punitive, and the backlash on that would not be good.
Well, and what I will share, you know, part of the reason why this committee exists is because the majority of the council was not comfortable doing one thing without the other. So the reason you all are here is because that, you know, just passing the ordinance is not good enough for the council. It's, you know, we're going to do this, but there's going to be fallout, and we want to make sure that we have solutions and a program in place to handle that. So what I could tell you is I don't really foresee it just being the ordinance. It needs to be both. And I love the Way to Work program, and I don't know if you and I have talked about it in the past, but, you know, it sounds like we have a lot of the pieces are already there. It's just a matter of assembling. I mean, that was part of the hope that this committee could do, is to connect the dots to some degree. What I'm wondering is, do we need to do the ordinance in addition to this, because that is one of the driving factors that makes participation in the program successful? Because at the end of the day, we don't want to create a program that no one uses.
I'd recommend you try the program first, if you're going to do the program eventually, in lieu of, in addition to an ordinance. Rather than attempting to outlaw a particular behavior, try to address that behavior in a positive way, and see what happens. If it doesn't work, then I would think an ordinance might be in order. But again, you have to talk about, are we talking about panhandling here? Are we talking about pedestrian safety, and how do those correlate or not?
Well, The goal is to alter behavior, with pedestrians and traffic. At the end of the day, the issue is those folks are interacting with people in cars, and it creates potential safety risk. So if the solution is to pass an ordinance that outlaws it, or create, a way to work program, that style thing, if those folks aren't on the corner panhandling, then there's no pedestrian safety issue. They're not there. So it's two options to essentially, in my opinion, solve the same problem. The issue is with the one, where it's the voluntary effort, it's the folks who, they don't want to participate in that program. They're happy panhandling. So the folks that don't want help, essentially. So we're stuck with those folks. They're going to sit there regardless, unless, there's a punitive reason not to do that. And so in that case, perhaps the ordinance is the better way to go. But, the case we've always talked about is the folks that need help and just need the push to get it.
One thing that I think that is in between that is that if you have an effective an awareness campaign about what's happening on the positive end of things, for those who do not want to participate, you've communicated to the community there is another option than just giving them money. And if you want to give to help somebody, and people want to help, and if you have a legitimate way for them to help, this then can diminish some of the compassion that is handed out without understanding how it may be used. So it would take time, but people would find out that this is a more productive way to help.
Yeah.
Less money going out the window means less panhandlers because they're not making any money.
Right. Well, and so maybe a solution to that is to look at the ordinance and pass it, but then say, maybe there's a year or an 18-month date in the future that it's going to be effective. And in the meantime, spin up these alternate programs right away, as quick as we can anyway. I mean, this is government after all. So 4 to 6 years later, we'd actually have these other programs in place. I'm kidding, guys. God. So if we get these, at least as best we can, these programs up and going sooner than that, and then use that time before that ordinance kicks in to say, look, this isn't a problem now, but it's going to be. How do we work together to sort of get the folks that want to be on board now, and then use that as an educational window to see if that takes care of it. So
a delay in
yes,
the
sir.
ordinance occurred to me, or whatever the ordinance turns out to read.
Sure.
The other question was probably of council is, can any ordinance or this one be layered? I mean, are there pieces of it we could put in place that perhaps, and walk into it at the same time we're building up? If we have an immediate concern that there is public safety, and if a work program and other supports would reduce that corner population, but we were still concerned about public safety, and the city felt like it needed an ordinance, can you put pieces of it in place that would address that immediate public safety concern?
Mr. Bonilla, could you comment on that? Or
Is any of it layered? Can it be laid out on a timetable, ordinance X through A, B, C, and then D, E, and F later on? And
I guess I'm
or is it
not,
all or nothing?
Well, and maybe,
I mean, are there pieces of it you can pull out and start with phase one of the ordinance, and then it becomes more
and maybe
complex
the
or
better
more
way to look at it
punitive?
is there areas we could do first?
Maybe it's
and then-
decriminalized or something to begin with, or something, I don't know.
the way we've got it written right now is I think there's about a half a dozen streets identified as arterial.
That's the other possibility.
And then there's a area designated as a congested area. You might
Kind of
somehow
circumscribe some of the,
limit the implementation of those areas. You could try that.
Okay.
so I was looking for an
Again, I
in-between
mean,
position as well.
The problem you're always going to have to keep in mind is
Movement.
the compelling government interest
Yeah.
at stake.
And it has to
is
be evenly
pedestrian safety.
applied.
Yeah, and I wasn't speaking in favor of the ordinance necessarily, although
Sure.
I do think public safety is a concern, and I really liked the video and,
Yeah.
and almost started applauding, and then I realized it wasn't live. But, and could feel a little enthusiasm in the room, and,
Yeah.
was exactly the kind of thing I hope would come from this, definitely the high road, and I would support something like that. I
Yeah.
think we've got enough infrastructure in place to get started pretty quickly.
Well, and that's the purpose why we're all here, is because
I
we know
agree.
we need a solution. So, yes, sir.
I think we do have some framework or something like this, because the studies that I've done in corrections says that an inmate's 70% less likely to reoffend if they have meaningful employment.
Yeah.
We have an inmate work program. and we contract with the city for 2 crews, and you pay a great deal of money for those. What we find is those inmates that are going out, everything that this individual said is true, that they feel dignity, they've gotten the skills that they need, they're earning some money from, granted it's not $9 an hour, but we take inmates out, or the city, contracts, and we have 2 officers that go out with offenders, and they're out in the communities doing things. So I think that there is a foundation of, obviously, if there was a person that was designated by the city, if you have $250,000, I'm not saying you do, but if you have $250,000 and you hire somebody that has a van, the city has a van, and they go to these sites and they pick somebody up to take, and they're doing work that's similar to what the inmates are already doing. I don't know how that works with, Luther would have to, and I have to look at that. I can't imagine there's not insurances and workers' comp and all that kind of stuff that has to come in through all that, which doesn't apply with me. But I think that we do have a work program that goes out into the community. And I think that, Barry said it very well, with what comes with restrictions comes with options. I see it, this guy's business interest is he doesn't mention anything about crashes or anything or accidents, but he mentions giving people dignity. Well, the business interest with him is to provide hope. Well, I don't know what these guys are paying for taxes, but they're getting people would rather see, instead of people standing on the corners, people working. I get that comment all the time, Brian. I'd rather see inmates out working instead of sitting in the jail. Sure. And so the city program, while I'm not trying to ruin it by any means, because I love it, it's a great program. There is an infrastructure that's there that, we're sending out 12 people a day that are doing 8 hours of work and are doing a good job, as far as I know. Then the city does a very good job in organizing their things. So I don't know if that's something, I'd be interested to see what jobs these people that they're doing, because I do get complaints. I don't know about the city, but I've got complaints when we had county crews. Well, that's fine if they're cleaning up the highway, but I don't want them in my neighborhood cleaning up. And of course, the jail, we had an issue with picking up metal. Community trust and stuff like that. But we do have some, you do have something that works, and people are getting jobs when they leave the jail from these places and in similar types of jobs.
That's excellent.
But
Yes, sir.
like Brian's remarks, and he's always got good ideas, appreciate that. And the other thing I wondered about watching the video is there might be an opportunity for a public-private partnership. And the
well, that's what that is. They work with their resumes.
But I meant a private for-profit business.
I see what you mean.
Because one of the things I want to, you probably already thought of it, is are we setting up any kind of interference with pursuit of a private for-profit staffing agency? I think there are 3 agencies around town where people gather in the morning to get dispatched on jobs, and I think it's probably a private for-profit endeavor doing that. I might be mistaken, but I just want to be sensitive to private capital commercial business, and if that is going to be an interference, what would they say about that? Or is there an opportunity for them and other existing programs or a nonprofit that would, or another layer of government that would, or different, maybe have more than one van or more than one effort, but I see an opportunity for a public-private partnership.
Well, these guys are cleaning up trash. I don't know a single entity that goes out and hires people to do that. At least in the city.
I don't know the kind of necessarily the jobs. Maybe they're other kinds of physical labor jobs, or some kind of that people are being employed on by the private agencies. But we might want to touch base with them, make sure that they don't have some input for us.
Well, so here's what I would propose we do. Let's sort out whether or not we think we need the ordinance, and then beyond that, we clearly, I think there's a lot of interest in this, and I had envisioned getting to this at some point anyway. I'm grateful you brought it up now, because that sort of helps set the perspective as to whether or not we really need the ordinance, but eventually we would have gotten to discussing this program anyway. We clearly need more information on it. I would be very interested to sort out exactly what they're doing. Are they employed by the city? And if so, in Kansas, what the insurance requirements would be and something like that. So we need to go back and run the traps on what it would take to spin up a program like this, at least from the government side in Topeka. And, clearly there's a partnership with the rescue mission in that in some cases. So let's sort out whether we need the ordinance or not, and independently of doing this program. I really think that it's definitely something that's worth looking at, and I'd like to spend the next meeting we have on working collaboratively to see what we could do that's similar to that. In the meantime, I'll get with Mr. Trout and sort out whether or not we have, he said there was a Chevy we might have. I don't know if the Ford guys are listening. Maybe they want to donate something just to get their name on it. But so in the future, let's sort out how we could leverage something like that. Because at the end of the day, public safety is very important to us, but also doing what we can to help these folks is equally as important. And that's really what we're all here to do, is to try and take care of the latter part of that if we can. So.
I apologize for all the floor time.
No, you're fine.
Chairman, thank you. But we may eventually need the ordinance. I could, if I had to decide like right now, today, I'd probably say let's delay it, but that's not speaking against it.
Well, and so my answer to that, or
which would give us time to gather data, by the way.
Yes.
Which I think is very important before we make too many assumptions, maybe gather some more data.
Okay.
And my second question is, I just don't remember, are the pieces of the ordinance that could be lifted out or decriminalize it, where the city council, if they felt compelled, could put it into place, but take out those, what's the word? Decriminalize, probably too harsh of a word, but the penalty pieces of it. Just put the framework in place.
Well, and maybe the solution is to step it. So your first offense is not a $500 fine or something like that. Could you comment more on that, or is that really how we want to do it?
Cumbersome warnings, warning tickets.
Yeah,
Well,
warnings.
You do have the options of lowering or adjusting the penalty for doing it.
Okay.
Removing the penalty altogether.
Well, I just ask as a layman, there's probably a lot of legal choices.
If you did that, then there's really not any point for the ordinance.
Except later to plug that in, if it becomes, if more social efforts don't work, then later you could plug in, or you could increase the penalties. I think, maybe just issue warning tickets, but I do think whatever we do, we need a period of data gathering, and so we have an even clearer vision of where we want to go.
So the one thing I will comment on ordinances that really was kind of a light bulb moment for me is, when we talked about doing the plaza in downtown, and the hoteliers in Topeka came to us and said, we want you to pass a law that makes everybody participate in this. All of the folks individually think it's a good idea, but unless Big Brother is telling me to do it, it's really easy for me to just not do it. But if Big Brother is telling me to do it, yeah, okay, I'll do it. I'm not going to complain about it, but it's the fact that we're basically setting a standard. Everybody's playing by that standard. So in this case, I'm wondering if that is where this ordinance could help, in that, I'd participate in this program, but I don't really have to, so maybe I'm not going to. Well, I have to participate in the program because that's the law of the land. So I'm wondering if, and that comes from your decriminalization concept, is, it's not so much that the idea of this ordinance is to put people in jail or to charge them $500. Right. It's to say, you know what, our community believes strongly in trying to help these folks enough that we've put a government nudge in place to push them in the direction of let's help, as opposed to, just give them the fish for the day. Let's teach them how to fish. And so maybe that's where this ordinance fits in. It's not so much we're going to use a heavy hand and a hammer, but we're going to use this as a tool to nudge them into a program. So, Mr. Lesser.
I would tend, my thoughts are that I would tend to feel that we do them both simultaneously. Quite frankly, from the standpoint of losing sight of that it is a safety issue, it is a distraction. The purpose of the ordinance then is also twofold, from obviously it has the effect on the individual, who could get hit by a car who's standing there with a sign, but there's also penalties in a way to reduce it towards the individual who's given the money out as well. There's also penalties there as well. And so I don't want to dismiss the safety issue. I love this program. I think it's fantastic, and I fully think we need to do this same type of program from at a simultaneous time. I like the idea of the ordinance goes in place as we work on this. There's a period before actual citations get issued. But the other thing, that, as you noticed also on the video, though, and I don't know whether they have an ordinance there or not, but they are continuing to go out there. They're continuing to deal with the issue, which is a safety issue, which means that it is continuing to happen. They have the tools in place to help these individuals, give them dignity, which these are all things that I want, but they're still there. And there probably are still some that don't still want to stand there. They don't want to have, they don't want to have the job. They don't want to have the opportunity. They don't want to get the help. And from that standpoint and the safety standpoint, I think it is important that we do have an ordinance in place for those type of situations that arise. But there again, simultaneously, as we build something like this, I think is absolutely the way that we go. But I think we have to have both, quite frankly.
He did mention that they had been criminalizing in the past, and he didn't say whether or not they were continuing to do so, but that was part of their at least initial strategy.
And their outcomes were pretty impressive too. The 20 people got a place to live.
Yeah, no, I think that's
40%
phenomenal.
reduction
So-
here and there, and I don't know if I disagree with the councilman or not, but I'll
Yeah.
bet you there's a way to we can get at.
And that is the same way as I would not support an ordinance if we did not have a program in like this where we're doing that. But I do feel that we have to have some teeth in the situations where there's non-compliance.
I thought you mentioned the word building. It is a building program. It's not something that will happen overnight.
Sure.
It will take some time. Ordinance could be quick. If you pass the ordinance without something in place that you are building, we don't necessarily have all the infrastructure in place to meet the requirements of that ordinance as far as shelter and those kind of things at this time. So whatever you do, there has to be building.
Well, and let me stop you and ask you real quick. Is that something that you think, given your knowledge, that we could spin up in 6 months, in 12 months? And I'm asking you to spitball here. I totally understand that. But how long do you think it would take to get a program?
A work program?
Yes. I mean, even not so much as robust as that, but just something that,
Similar.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to say. I think we have a few things in place that are very proactive. There's a resource issue. Where are the jobs? Who's going to pay for them? How are we interfacing with what's already happening in the community? I think the rescue mission has a number of things to offer, but with limitation at the same time.
Sure.
I think that there are other partners that would jump on board with this. So I think the will is there that could be significantly down the road, probably by the end of this year. Significantly down the road.
Right.
I would say 2019, probably there would be some, in the first quarter of 2019, there'd probably be some good action on this.
Okay.
But if you're talking about additional shelter, you're talking about additional services for those who are inebriated, additional services for mentally ill, those kind of things, those are going to be more long-term building projects. We need them. This
Agreed.
could be the kickstart to a
That's what
number of
I'm
those
hoping.
things in the community to create more of those. But also at the same time, we did some research on a number of cities like Albuquerque. And most of this type of program is still pretty new. I think we saw 2017 up there. And some of the cities aren't doing very well with it. Some are doing pretty well. But really, if you want to test it, it hasn't been around long enough.
Yeah.
I think that we have to go into that with eyes wide open that
Yeah.
we will.
Well, this is the
be
bleeding
learning.
edge.
It is. It is. So, but I think a greater reason to consider it is that it is offering something that needs to be offered. And also, the public in this community is of a mindset that if you've got a good plan to help people, they will get on board with it. If you just have an ordinance, they may not get on board with it, and I could see some significant backlash at the city in this council. And also, especially when, I'm talking to the camera and I say, sorry, we're out of shelter, we don't have any more, that they can't bring them into, and that didn't work so well. No,
Well, and I'm
that's
not
just
opposed to
reality.
passing it and saying, we're going to pass this now, and it's going to take 2 years to be effective. And then immediately, we're going to put up, signs just like they did that say, if you really want to help these folks here,
Help us build the program.
yeah, do this to donate,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
will go toward seed money to fund this program. And then that gives us time to get it up and going and build some public awareness and that sort of thing before it actually kicks in and start going. So in that case,
And there was a delay, no difference in the delay that we did when we, passed the firecracker ordinance.
Yes.
We passed the ordinance,
Yeah.
it did not go into effect.
Yeah.
One concern
So-
about that, I mean, it sounds good. It sounds like help everybody where the storm's coming.
Yeah.
However, if the storm is already here, then if you're saying we're delaying public safety for 2 years, then if it's
Yeah.
really truly a traffic safety issue, then that might backfire.
Yeah.
That's why I was thinking maybe we could step into the penalty phase with smaller
Yeah.
and graduated,
Yeah.
kind of sanctions.
Well, that's
But
true.
The other comment
Yeah.
I would have, to start a program could happen pretty quickly, just depending on the amount of resource and
Yeah.
the will. I think a culture change will take
Yes.
a little while.
Yes.
So do we need a year, 2 years? I mean,
Yeah.
I think, but that's what takes a while, is
Yeah.
changing the culture and the attitude of a group of people, and then you get behavior change.
Well, Mr. Gagne, maybe you could make some comments on that. So if we were to pass it now and say this is effective now to help address the public safety issue, but we phased in the citation aspect of it, so maybe for the next 2 years, we were just going to give folks warnings instead of actual fines, and then we could immediately put up the signs and start working to build a program to actually help the folks. How does that look in the eyes of the law when you're talking about constitutionality?
Well, having a work program like this would certainly help, but I guess the point that I would stress with you is having that ordinance it comes with a certain amount of legal risk.
Sure. So there wouldn't necessarily be more legal risk if we said we're going to enact the ordinance as written, but we're going to phase in the penalty aspect of it,
Well,
or delay the penalty
That
aspect
risk
of
is
it.
going to be there if there's any penalty at all.
Okay, so that wouldn't necessarily make it worse then. Okay. Well, so given that then, if we say, we think we need the ordinance because it's realistic, or there's a great possibility we would need it anyway, regardless of the program we pick, then we want to sort out how long the wait time would be before the teeth part actually kick in. What are your thoughts on that? And then if we agree on that, then we could talk about the program aspect of what we need to do to help the displaced folks. And I know you had your hand up, Mr. Cole.
Well, I do support the ordinance, and maybe that's not very popular. I do because I think that you've identified, and I agree with, who've been down in the lawsuit realms. I do believe in having some statistics to base, and and Luther's right, nothing's foolproof. But I do agree
Right.
that you have a public safety issue, and I can't imagine, this is just me, I can't imagine say, look, we have a high area now. If we want to get some more data to really drill down on specifics or whatever, then okay, but I think this is just one step in that direction. Now, when I look at the program, you have to remember, and I'd like to do some more work on that, his pitch was, don't give to panhandlers. It's donate your money here.
Yeah.
And we will find you work. And so, I'd have to look at, you're talking a million, what'd he say, 600 people in the metropolitan area, 600,000?
Yeah.
Okay, we have what in our metropolitan area? 80?
180.
70?
Yeah.
Okay, so, I'm sure we have need, but you're talking, quite a difference there. I think that it wouldn't cost very much to put signs, but I'd also like to get
Yeah.
information, are they just addressing those who are standing out who say they need help? Are they going to all the homelesses? Are they going under bridges? Are they going to other areas to say, do you need a job? And, you don't see it, just
Right.
people holding up signs.
Well, and I do agree that we need to do some more research, and
Yeah.
you guys would probably be pretty attuned to where some of these folks are.
We can give you a pretty good idea.
Now, I
And-
don't get out and look at all the signs, but I will tell you
Yeah.
that I don't see very many signs that say, I need work. The signs that I see usually says, need help, can I have, need
Yeah.
anything will help, God bless, which I'm
Yeah.
very generous in helping, but I don't see, I need work, and,
Oh.
when Bill mentioned the stuff about, you'd have key staffing and other things like that, well, they can hire them,
Yeah.
Well, maybe, unless there are background checks that might preclude that, and are we creating another level of work program, which I'm not opposed to. I'm just saying,
Correct.
Yeah.
we need to be
Yeah, well,
aware of
yeah,
that.
I don't know what their criminal background, I agree, but.
I don't know what they're hiring
Sure.
for the day, kind of requirements are in terms of backgrounds.
This warrants,
I think by and large, this is a specialty population as far as employment too. These are the folks that probably are not going to fit the normal
distinct from-
stream.
okay.
Yeah,
Some
unless there's
transient as well, I mean, if they're
some
coming through.
transient, yeah, and there's a significant amount of mental health challenges, substance abuse challenges, and so they do not fit into the mainstream. Topeka
Sure.
Rescue Mission has some work programs, but it takes a while to get people ready for those. Just coming off the street, we've been talking about here recently about maybe instituting one of ours for that particular population. That would be an experiment. I think that what they're doing to begin with is more day labor.
Yep.
That the city has a job, they have a need, just like inmates. We go out and we clean up parks and we clean up gutters and those kind of things, which is a lot more, it's easier to manage that with multiple challenged people.
I think that's the easier part of the program. I think I think where the money is going is to pay the inmates, who is the worker. But I saw the biggest challenge will be the money that goes to that St. Martin's to provide the shelter, the food, the services. I think that's where the biggest need for money is, because I think, to be honest with you, I think the city, I don't know, but I think the city could come up with 20 signs. I think the city could find a van. I think the city could address, through neighborhood stuff, to address how much trash there is, could be picked up, and things like this. I'm not saying it could happen overnight. I think that would be the easiest part.
Yeah.
But remember, after they're done, they drop them off. They take them to St. Martin's
Yeah.
shelter, and they drop them off. So it's going to be, if that was the rescue mission, you'd have to have the space and the
We'd have to have the
resources.
space and the programs available, but there's also the $9 an hour he was talking about,
Yeah.
paying these individuals. So I see that probably as one of the biggest upfront costs.
Well, and that's something we look at. I don't know what the cost of living in Albuquerque is, and if their cost of living is significantly higher than ours, $9 to them may be,
Yeah, whatever that-
$7
whatever that
here.
fee is, yeah.
Yes, so,
It'd have to be minimum wage.
agreed, absolutely.
Plus all
It'd have to be,
unemployment and the-
it'd have to be an appropriate fee
Well,
for
and
that, so.
some of the, we're going on some of the assumptions that
Yeah.
that other conversations that you and I have had are in regards to, yes, some of them are going to be dropped off at St. Martin, where, it is. But then some of the other few that, like you and I have talked about, some of these people have their own houses that are standing on this corner and are not truly in need, as we've discussed. There again, the ordinance.
Yeah.
Some of the panhandling things that I've seen is that when they're addressing, and I think Luther could address this as well, is the aggressive panhandling, or the laws that have survived, or rules, or those who are falsifying the issue of, I'm homeless, I need money.
Yeah.
And then when they have the commercial side of it, if you're taking an economic benefit of something, and you're not homeless, you're getting it out for false.
And that's my thought with having both of these simultaneous, to help the people who really do, but then there also needs to be some teeth for the guy who, like I've said, I've seen get in his car and drive off to go back to, who doesn't want to work, quite
And other
frankly.
nefarious issues such as trafficking. There are people that make people do
Yeah.
this so that they get the money from them.
Correct.
It's forced labor.
Yeah.
So that they can use those dollars for something else.
I mean,
Would they still?
I've seen incidents
Yeah.
where they're talking to people about safe signs on what to put to keep them out of trouble. There was an individual that talked about this Michigan deal, which are still under litigation, but some things that I've read have said that they're having going to their police department for no cost, or their the mission, and they're asking them to sign up and get a lanyard or something, so they can make sure that, look, if you're really in need,
Yeah.
you can do this, it doesn't cost you anything, and here's some specific rules. And so that seems to be one of the things that I've read in quite a few
Yeah.
ordinances, that, but it doesn't go to, but it, then they had some exceptions and stuff like that.
Well, so what's the general consensus then? Do folks feel like we need to do the ordinance to give the other side of it, the teeth that it needs to move ahead. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, one question. I may ask Luther, I mean, with those intersections, the 8 intersections and the congested area, if we put signage and all them or preventive, what's to say they're not going to go to one of those intersections that's not mentioned in your ordinance?
Well,
They'll move to another intersection. That's
right, and I think the ordinance would allow for that. That's part of our, we have to allow them all alternative channels to do that sort of thing, to bag or panhandle. We have to
It is a constitutional right.
allow that to occur in other locations.
Yeah.
As part of it.
And that's part of the reason why we're talking about what can we do to help these folks?
Right.
Because a lot of it, if we just did the ordinance and nothing else, you're absolutely right. All it would do is displace people. They would just move and continue doing it.
And
So that's not really helping them. So at the end of the day, how do we, the other side of it is then how do we make sure that we have an opportunity for those folks to change if they want
True
to?
need. Right.
Yeah.
The thing with the signs is, it's not just at the locations that we identify in the ordinance. I mean, the signs and the billboards and the advertising and videos, those are things that can be done all over the city to address the entire population, because what you're really trying to do is to educate people.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things we have to remember is, rather than just a pure enforcement approach, this is more of a educate, encourage, and then enforce as a last resort.
Yeah.
So the signs and the educational aspect of this is, a big piece of that is getting people to understand how they can best make that donation to help that person.
And that's something that, I bring up San Francisco because when I was in San Francisco, you go in the hotel room with, when you walk in there and the TV's going and it's their infomercial that's going, talks about these boxes that you see all around San Francisco that are actually money deposit boxes that you can drop money in. And then the infomercial talks about the different programs such as, if it was there, it would be Topeka Rescue Mission, it'd be Vallejo, and it actually lists these 20 organizations, split this money, that you do that, you're going to help people more by, instead of handing the money to somebody who may not have a true need or is feeding an addiction, you put it in these boxes that you see all throughout San Francisco. It's going to this organization, this organization, this organization, and similarly the signs, but you actually can they're actually little meters, for lack of a better term, but.
So the reason I was asking that question, so if someone moves from those areas of danger, say for pedestrian and traffic and everything, I would definitely suggest that they do get some sort of lanyard and be registered somewhere with either PD or the city, so we know where these people are moving around to, and then also give the opportunity for those individuals who, and I'm going to just say it like the firefighters with the boot block, that they come and have insurance or whatever. Any charitable organization that's wanting to collect at corners or intersections, that they come and register as well. So we have a good idea of who's doing what on the streets. If we're still going to allow the collection of charitable organizations at these intersections.
Question, what's the difference between requirement for you to register and get permission to do that, or anybody else, and panhandlers not?
Well, I don't think we can do that, actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gagne, but we can't require, people have to have access to do that in those areas.
Yeah, whether you call it registering or a permit,
Yeah.
basically you're talking about this, either one. It's a system where somebody has to get permission in advance to do this. And the problem with that is panhandling is, with constitutional protections around that and the speech and the activity, it's a right now kind of thing. And if
I don't have to have a permit to speak, same concept.
Well, it's very thin line then into the government starting to base its regulations on the content of what's being said or what the activity is. We allow charitable solicitations, but not the panhandler, because the panhandler's permit was denied or they didn't apply for one. But that's the
Which
danger of that area.
doesn't work. If it's a safety issue, it's a safety issue, is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask, just to learn more, but, brought up the idea of people who will wash your windows on, at the stoplight at 6th and Kansas, what about that? What about if I want to put up a hot dog stand at, in front of Fidelity Bank? I mean,
Well, so
what's
within the
difference?
ordinance, the idea is.
Public health
if-
could be that the meat is tainted, the silverware's, the litter. I mean, what?
I see what you mean.
See,
Well,
what is the difference in I'm
So the
not arguing
street
for or
vendors-
against panhandling, I'm just trying to learn the differences between being out in public and doing something that's unauthorized.
Sure.
or
Well, and we
authorized.
require street vendors to have a permit.
So and I'm not trying to be, whatever, but what's the difference legally? What is the difference? If I have a right to sell hot dogs on the corner, and that's just a rhetorical question, or maybe it's a real question, but that's where I'm having a little bit of trouble with what about related activities, like I'm going to wash your windshield at this intersection.
Well, it goes away. I mean, it's as
Yeah.
I say, it's all encompassing. I mean,
Well, and so you're right. You would not be able to have a hot dog cart and sell hot dogs to folks driving past. It's not the activity you're performing, it's the fact that you're interacting with traffic on the street.
no,
Back to
actually,
public safety, not
Right.
just panhandling.
Yeah, you couldn't do anything that interacts with a vehicle in those given areas.
The answer right now is you could have a bag of hot dogs in the median by Panera, right there in that, and do your hot dogs right now. You could. The thing that would stop you from doing it would be the requirements of selling food from, but from a standpoint.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. But you're right on the money. Absolutely. The fact is that no matter what activity you want to do, it's the interacting, it's the distracting drivers, that sort of thing that's causing the public safety issue. It's not the content of what you're doing, which is what Mr. Gagne said. It's got to be content neutral. So it doesn't matter what you want to do, you can't distract drivers in those given areas. And correct me if I'm wrong, please, sir, but.
But the reason for my comment was
Sure.
if we had like organizations that just can't show up at an intersection, start collecting with a large number of people, to have it where they would go to the city and say, hey, we want to be registered to do this on this date at this time. And like I know with a lot of cities, they require them to have insurance.
Yeah.
Liability insurance and everything. So I just want to make
Yeah.
sure that the firefighters get the opportunity to continue this
Sure.
historically old collection for MDA without,
So, and is there a way, because we close streets all the time for, various reasons. Is there a way to overturn, or not overturn, but, I mean, is there a way to come up with a mechanism so that anybody who wants to do something like that, well, the problem is, though, is you have to allow everyone to do it. If they apply for it, we'd have to allow them to do it. There isn't a way to deny, because we can't say the firefighters could do it, but the panhandler can't.
Well, no, and in Wichita, the way they handle that is the firefighters are then now set up no different than the Salvation Army sets up in front of Walmart or
Yeah.
Target. They set up in different
Girl Scouts.
the
Yeah.
Girl Scouts, they sit outside of home at Walmart. Now, the numbers they have down there from talking to the mayor, it's been more beneficial to them. They've raised more money in those positions and been welcomed, been open arms of, hey, we want the firefighters here. We want them out here doing that. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Well, the issue is that if we wanted to come up with a permit process, and again, Mr. Gagne, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we wanted to come up with a permit process for the fire department or for any other nonprofit, you basically have to grant everybody a yes, because one group cannot interfere with traffic and another group be denied interfering with traffic, if that makes sense.
Right.
and I understand that, but a lot
The
of.
permit process is going to cause legal problems with
Right.
your ordinance, because
Okay.
who gets a permit, who
Right.
gets
Right.
denied.
It's that decision-making process
Yes.
that causes the issue. Because why is one group different than the other exercising a constitutional right?
Yes.
And I was just
Yeah.
looking at the fact,
Yeah.
that the restrictions are the things that you need. You have to wear yellow vests, you have to have signage up there. You have to have insurance, just
Yeah.
just to make it, to show those that they're legally
Yeah.
collecting and are being safe among traffic and everything. And I just had to put that out there. I was
Yeah.
asked to
Sure.
put that out there for.
So clarification,
Yeah.
would this ordinance prohibit fire department from collecting for MDA?
It would in those specific intersections that are covered. So there's only two that overlap with where they collect now and with what would be included in the ordinance. And so they would need to move those operations to different intersections or do it off the street.
I've seen health
But-
departments back up traffic too, giving, vaccines through the car window too.
Yeah.
A good cause and all
Yeah.
that. I'm sure
Yeah.
support, some, I'd be in favor of it's not the ordinance that I'm opposed to. It's just, I wonder if
Yeah.
we should walk and not run and have a decent wait period, not only for the implementation of programming or
Yeah.
multiple programs, but the change of culture. And, maybe a look at only the highest risk intersections first. And
Yeah.
maybe we could layer it that way, but you've probably already thought about that, Luther, so I don't mean to be doing your work, and I'm not qualified to, but I wonder if there's a way to walk and not run into an ordinance.
So what you're talking about is maybe raising the threshold so it drops off some of the intersections that there
Or
could be a
it adds
danger.
intersections as
Yeah.
we go that
Okay.
are less risk, but starts with the highest risk
Yeah.
intersections. Those could coincide with other activities that might occur, or it might not, but
Yeah.
I just
Okay.
ask as a layman.
Yes, sir.
Luther, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would prohibit the traditional MDA boot block, but they could stand there and say, my people are right here in this parking lot, as long as you have permission from the business, like we talked about last session, so that they could still do that as long as there's no exchange between the vehicle.
Right. Yeah, it would take
As
all
an
of that,
option.
including the exchange between the pedestrian and the driver. So if all they were doing was just directing people's attention to something going on in a parking lot and people pulled over, that would be fine.
And Luther, would it create an additional legal risk if we said if you want to engage in this behavior, there's mandatory safety requirements that are reasonable, like the vest and that sort of thing? Does that add a significant legal issue if we require readily available safety gear, high visibility stuff?
There's some risks, yes, posed by that, not as much as a permitting system, but
Because that would
The court's
allow
gonna
the
look at-
firefighters that have that, and if anybody wanted to go out and buy a yellow vest, they could. I mean, that's readily
the
available.
problem with it is you're requiring the panhandler then to basically plan out their activities for the next day or into the future to arrange to get that vest and that kind of safety equipment.
And that's true, but we require them to wear clothing, which has to be acquired from somewhere, so.
Right. But the courts tend to look at panhandling more as a right that, even if it's a right now kind of thing, you're allowed to engage in that activity as speech without having to get advanced planning or permission.
Equipment, okay.
Does the courts distinguish, Luther, between a panhandler, somebody who does it all the time, or somebody who just does it once? And the reason I say that is that I've read that this permitting system in some cities has mentioned that if your intent is to be out there more than 5 days, then you should get this, to identify those who really want to do it. I don't know. I don't know if that even makes sense what I'm saying, but.
Possibly. I'm not familiar with a case
Yeah, I'd have to go
talked
back.
about that.
Yeah.
I've seen that too, that, yeah.
I think the other thing on the safety that we need to keep in mind too is not just the safety of the pedestrian standing there or the individual who's exchanging, giving money or whatever it is at that point. It's also when that happens is the other person, the unwilling participant 2 cars down when the car stops to go do that, and then they either try to avoid and hit somebody. I mean, so it's not just those two with the exchange, it's the other individuals as well who are not willing participants whose safety is also at risk.
So we're going to start running out of time here in the not too distant future. So let me ask
10-4.
this. So if we, let's decide as best we can if we want to look at the ordinance. Exclude for now the implementation time. So let's do the ordinance at some point in the future, and then next time we meet, let's talk about, and this will give everybody a chance to do a little bit of research, let's talk about the program that we would spin up alongside this. And then in our final presentation, we'll take back to the governing body, we'll say, we want to implement this ordinance and this program, and we won't enact the requirements of the ordinance until the program is up and running. Because realistically, we don't know right now what that is. It could be 2 years, it could be 3 years. That'll give us a chance to sort of put that in place. The immediate future, obviously, nothing would change, but that gives us time to sort of get some of this stuff up and going. Yes, sir.
Question independent of panhandling. Is there enough of a community safety concern in these thoroughfares to create an ordinance that restricts distraction
Of any kind.
of any kind?
So
And if there is, why? I mean, what is the evidence of that? That is generally how you.
Yeah. Well, I would ask you what
Absolutely.
constitutes a distraction, though, because, I mean, technically, I get distracted by billboards. You know,
Okay,
any
good question.
action that takes your eyes off the road for, so we'd have to
I'm
define that.
I'm assuming that a big part of this started around the issue of panhandling and
Yeah.
gravitated towards pedestrian safety
Sure.
and traffic safety. So you take that off the table because there's some inherent problems with just focusing on that or segregating that out.
Sure.
Is there enough of a evidence based upon the accidents that have occurred there that these were because of distractions of a pedestrian traffic nature to create an ordinance? And I would say if there is, that's pretty well stated that we got to do something about that.
Sure.
So segregating that out, that's what you look at. If there's not enough evidence, then I would say maybe the ordinance standalone is not
Well, and
wise to do.
I don't think anybody's advocating for a standalone ordinance. It's either, it's do the ordinance with the program, or,
Well, okay, maybe not standalone, but enacting it, whether it's phased in or whatnot.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Before
Okay.
there's adequate understanding of the
what
alternate
exactly we're
for
trying to
those
do.
that would be
Okay.
affected.
Mr. Gagne, can you comment at all on the statistics we have now?
What we have now is, I guess, just to explain how we put this together, is we started with the top 10 list, basically. Top 10 most dangerous accident locations in the city, in those intersections. And from there, we start trying to narrow that down. Well, how many of those involve pedestrians? And looking at accidents with a pedestrian, whether it's a bicycle or a person on foot in a car at those locations. That's how we arrived at the streets that we did, because that literally is our top 10 list of highest accident locations for pedestrians. The problem that we get is it's not necessarily panhandlers that are those pedestrians. So that's where it's important for, in your consideration, what I said earlier
And
about.
this would this address some of those issues outside of panhandling entirely as well?
Well, there's an issue of distracted driving going on. I mean, we know that because a pedestrian got run over.
Sure.
Our ordinance is drafted in a way where the issue of having a distracted driver at a busy, high-risk intersection is inherently dangerous. That's one approach.
Sure.
The split, though, that I mentioned with courts and how they look at that is some courts will say, that's not good enough, we need to see your stats and your figures. And they kind of call you out on that. Okay, a compelling government interest, prove it, that the pedestrians and panhandling are tied together and that the people soliciting are the ones getting hit by cars. That makes your ordinance then necessary. I don't know which way ours would shake out on that.
Okay.
How did they
It's the
come up
risk.
with, how did they come up with the data? Because I know this, that for instance, I'll give an example of the, KDOT has certain restrictions in regards to signs and how quickly, like a digital sign, so I'm talking, how quickly they can change because they become distractive of driving and it changes and catches your eye. Is there any of that type of data? Was any of that used in in that? Are you following where?
We didn't use any of that for this purposes. We were simply looking at accident reports and numbers and whether they were vehicles or pedestrians involved in them. And plotting the location of each of those on a map and figuring out which intersections had the highest numbers.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So my guess is Luther and others have already been down this road, but stepping outside of panhandling itself as a behavior and an activity, if it's not safe, it's not safe.
Sure.
If I get a bullhorn and stand at any intersection, really, although where I live is probably less dangerous than if it was right downtown, and start announcing my personal beliefs,
Yeah.
my business beliefs, my political beliefs, and it's so loud that with your windows rolled up, you hear me, and that's a distraction.
Yep.
And I'm on a street corner, a public thoroughfare.
Yep.
Or in the middle of an intersection,
Yep.
I mean, really, kind of, in a way, doesn't matter that it's panhandling, except to the degree that we can have an opportunity to help somebody.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
Sergeant Clam and his behavioral health unit do every day.
Yeah.
Come into contact with, a score of people
Yeah.
every day. But
Well,
really, what's the difference?
You're
whether
right, and
selling
that's the
Girl Scout
larger
cookies
issue
through
that this
a
ordinance
bullhorn
tries to
or-
address.
Or panhandling, or preaching the gospel,
Yeah.
or expressing our beliefs, or walking down Main Street just protesting in general, or just saying whatever.
Well, and that's what my point was right at the beginning when you were talking, is I don't know that why is important, whether it was a rear end, whether it was a cell phone, whether if these numbers are your top 10, they are inherently the most dangerous intersections for whatever reason, and adding a further distraction to those top 10 is inherently more dangerous.
However, if I was a lawyer, which I'm not, if I was an adversarial lawyer and was going to come against Luther on this, or the city of Topeka, I might say,
Well, if you try to fight Luther, you'll lose by default.
I'm sure I would, yeah. But he's an awful nice guy. I would say, okay, why have you enacted this ordinance? Was it because there was distractions that were on the street, or were people on their cell phones? And there's got to be some records of those, and if you're saying that you can't do this, this, and this on the street, but actually it's because distracted driving was going on because people were looking at this, which is very common today, then
Cause and effect.
yeah, it's a cause of it. So it's a patient, it's got a sickness. We got a sickness with safety in our community on these thoroughfares, but to diagnose it effectively, you need to know why it's sick.
Yeah.
And so are we being thorough in diagnosing the sickness?
Well, that was his inherent
correlation
comments
or
about,
cause and effect?
it's a risk. Half the courts will say, well, you need to prove exactly what's causing that, and the other half will say, well, you can document there's a risk there to begin
So
with.
if you're willing to take the risk, then there's pedestrian safety issues here.
Yeah.
And so take the risk and pass the ordinance, but do it with the understanding that you're going to have backlash because panhandlers are going to be removed.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, say, we're working on a solution.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I just see it as a preventative deal, and, for me, I wouldn't want to I'd rather have a policy against suicide prevention instead of waiting till a suicide happened in the jail, and then I make the policy. So for me, I look at this as, I make the policy, the ordinance, because I wouldn't want it to be, well.
We want
it's
it to be
important to have
proactive,
an
not
act- let's-
reactive.
Okay, let's wait for 2 panhandlers to get killed, and then it becomes an issue.
Yeah.
I don't, that's just my personal belief. I agree that you want to have, but I don't think we wait till if we have data that shows these are high-risk areas, and all we're doing, we're not saying somebody can't speed, we're saying we're just asking people to stay away from these areas for public safety areas, or that you don't need it, and you're hitting drivers, we don't want drivers distracting anybody, and things like this. And I just looked up, New Mexico does have a panhandling, Albuquerque has a panhandling ordinance, and their first one was shot down, but their second one strictly says, if I'm reading this correctly, says that they stay off of busy median sidewalks, and they've even gone as far as saying you can't hand out flyers. But they do it to everybody, which they mean,
That was
they
kind of-
made it very specific about firefighters and Girl Scouts or anybody in these busy areas. But they do have an ordinance.
So do we have consensus that we move forward without agreeing to the ordinance right now, that we move forward with planning to have the ordinance, and then we could start talking about how do we help the folks that are displaced by the ordinance?
And again, I'd ask you to think about the pros and cons of
if we have 10 hotspots, can we start with 5? Although there might be an unintended
Well, and
consequence.
yeah,
of
so
moving
implementation
somebody.
would, that's, we still have to discuss
More people in one
that.
spot by doing that,
Yeah.
too. There could be,
Yeah.
but, at least think about that, I would think.
So given what we have, knowing that implementation and, phases in and that sort of thing, we still need to discuss those. With the ordinance we've been presented, is there consensus to move ahead with that and then discuss how it would be implemented and what the other program aspects would be?
That was my other question. Would city manager's office put together an implementation operational team and make a program like There's a Better Way of Work or related programs?
Well,
Or
that's
they actually-
the next thing we would
later on
discuss,
get ahead
is,
of
and
the
we
skis
would
too
pull,
much.
obviously him in and so our work is not
That's
done
not our
today.
work. I mean,
Well,
that's-
but it is though.
Oh.
Yeah, that's why you all are here, is that's the aspect of it. So today, if we have consensus to not change the wording of the ordinance, then the next step would be, let's talk about the program,
Okay.
and then we'll talk about how do we phase in implementation around the program we would design.
I got it.
Yes, sir.
If this committee recommends moving forward with recommended ordinance, is that we're done with that piece and the rest of it's up to council to phase that in, or do we then talk about the phasing of the ordinance?
We would talk about the phasing, and we would make a recommendation. What I would like to take back to the council is a recommendation on the wording of the ordinance, a program that would help the displaced folks, and then a recommendation on how the ordinance would phase in around that program. So we would go back with 3 things, essentially.
If you're looking for a motion, I would move that we proceed with looking at all 3 phases.
Excellent. Second?
Second.
Okay, wonderful. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent. Okay. So, what I would say is, next time then, start thinking about the program that we would implement around this. So,
Or programs.
or programs, that's right. So, I'll work with the city manager and Mike, number 9, to talk about what aspect the city can bring. I'll also reach out to Mike, number 5, and bring him up to speed. We'll start talking about the aspect that the city can provide. If you guys could work on, what your agencies are able to bring, and then think about the resources you need to do that. This is going to cost money.
And others will be affected
Yes.
all down the line.
Yes.
Sergeant Clams unit,
Yeah.
others
Yeah.
in town
So
will be affected.
what we need to do is we need to sort out what needs to be done, and then how much it's going to cost, and then we'll talk about how we're going to fund it. Because we can't ask for money without having an idea where it's going to come from. So,
I'll have my people call Barry's people. We'll do lunch.
excellent. And so from that, then, we'll be talking about how to actually do the program. And we'll just bill it to Brent's budget. I mean, that'd be fine anyway, right? Mr. Trout, you've got all the money, apparently?
I really appreciate
Yeah.
The attitude of the group.
No, this is
Foresight of
fantastic.
the
This is
city
what I'd hoped this
and,
committee could accomplish, is let's take a look at how we solve the underlying problem. Because that's really what we're all here to do, is to help people.
I think
So,
we have to include in this groups like the firefighters and MDA to make sure that there
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
little or no damage to the efforts that they put out there, because
Yeah.
that's as much a part of this community as around the whole country, that we must
Yeah.
include that as part of the solution.
I agree.
I think we need, I think we need to be cognizant, obviously, of what what the ramifications are to the boot campaign, and what other options that we can do to do that, because it certainly isn't the intent to cut off, the funding that's through that. So I think we need to, there's another place, Wichita, like I said, I can reach out to Albuquerque. If they have this, then their firefighters have to be doing something, I think
Yeah,
we
something
look at, say, what can we do, and build partnerships with other, and maybe even make it better, you know what I mean? I mean, there's lots of times that if I knew I was going to the store and the boot campaign was going on, I can reach in and grab my change. There's other times I pull the corner, I want to put money on a boot, and my damn son's robbing my frickin' change drawer for firecrackers, you know what I mean? So, so I got nothing to put in there, you know?
Your son.
It's his fault.
Nice.
Dylan.
Okay, public comment. Does anybody in the audience wish to present anything? Yes, sir. You'll have to come to the podium.
I'd like to comment. I was going to share a couple of panhandling experiences, but I don't think we're addressing that. But what I noticed from the gentleman's video is they already had signs on the corners.
Yes.
So the education program had kind of been started.
Yes.
So I think if you're going to make an ordinance, just a suggestion, because I can start at work. I work for Santa Fe. On the way home, you see the camp on the north side of the river, and the drunks and and I'm not bagging on them. It's just it. But and I get off of Wanamaker because I go down 10th Street because it's a pretty ride, and there's the panhandlers there at the. Now I don't know if that's one of the top. I'm sure Wanamaker's probably on the hit list because that's where most of the traffic is. But as far as the safety issue, where does the safety, or where does the, I guess, interstate area of responsibility end?
Oh, the boundary.
The boundary.
The I-70 boundaries?
Yeah,
The
I
federal
mean,
boundaries.
because where they're at right now, they're on the island, or they're on the inlet to the.
Oh, I see what you. So that's,
you know what I'm saying?
Well,
so
and that's camping, and we have a team that's working on that too.
Right, but that might, if that's one of your intersections, that might be your you're in or you're out, so to speak.
I got
They're
you.
on, there's a sign, no pedestrian, whatever.
Gotcha.
So you're in violation. But along with that, if you're going to implement the program, we probably need to maybe put up some signs that it's not against the law, but panhandling.
If you want to help these folks, here's a good way to do it.
Right,
instead.
well, that, but also panhandling's dangerous, you know what I'm saying? So, without violating their constitutional rights. And then if they are in violation, as you're implementing a program, make out some flyers and have, I know police officers have plenty to do already, but if you're going to dispatch them to roust them, give them a pamphlet, because I know the rescue mission does an awesome job. They do. It's trying to catch, because I think what inevitably is going to happen is you're going to have the destitute, which they're probably more than happy to make it to the rescue mission because that's their last option. And then I'm a craftsman, I'm a sheet metal worker. The panhandlers, some of them are professionals. That's their craft, whether you like it or not. We had discussed this. I'm the president of our union. We kind of talked about it. You have you have a peddler's ordinance, I guess, and it talks about the farmer's market and the door-to-door. Somehow we need to, if you're going to do that as your craft, that's fine, but instead of it being an immediate necessary thing and violating their constitutional laws, if that's how you choose to do your money, go get it. We're going to check your background out and find out if you are a veteran or not, because there's a lot of veterans that work, and I don't want you promoting yourself as a veteran. I mean, maybe constitutionally you can, but you're fibbing. You know what I'm saying? Don't fib. Don't play on people's feelings. If you're not a veteran, then don't say that. Because I've stopped a couple times. And they said, we'll work for food. My wife's from the Philippines, and she's a great cook. And I've offered them my lunch, and they didn't want it. We have a side business, and we check vending machines on a Sunday evening. While it's late, we go to Golden Corral. I come out of Golden Corral. A guy approaches me in the parking lot and says, hey, my dad, you got a very polished story. My dad's open heart surgery from Ottawa, blah, blah, blah. There's my truck over there. We got the hood on, open. I said, okay. Pull up to the gas pump and I'll buy you $10 of gas to get you to Ottawa.
Didn't want it.
They never pulled up. So I think part of where this discussion is going to have to go is you're going to have the actual people that are in need. And if we have the education program and we like that matrix or whatever about if I got $5 and I gave it away, I wish I could have copied it. I'd give it to my wife. We can help more people by donating it to the right way. But we need to. That was my point, is the professionals that are doing it, get a permit or a lanyard or whatever, and, do it the right way.
Thank you.
Yep.
And what was your name?
My name's James Smith.
James, thank you.
And
for
I'll
coming.
offer to help if you have some of this program to get it going, because I do have some construction skills and I'm affiliated with some. The other thing, I guess, on Facebook is I know we're running out of time. Some of the cities have been, I'll call it like a little shed, but they're developing these little shed communities, and they probably have a public, toilet, bathroom facility. But if you ever get off on Wanamaker, especially in the summer, that area on Meningers, they're camping out in the woods up there because that rescue mission, the truck with the coffee or whatever, would go up there and help them. But I guess they've canceled that or whatever. But we need to find maybe some area that the city owns that's, like the dignity, the whole dignity thing, they need to go to work because that's what they want. They want purpose in life, and you
Sure.
get them, like the military, you get them doing the same thing over and over again. They learn to like it, or at least, learn to, function in that, so it moves along.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you for your
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I will have Liz reach out to schedule a meeting in the not-too-distant future. Everybody have a great weekend and come back with some information. We'll move on from there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.